Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, David. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be a part of the show with me here today.
Jag, it's great. I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. David, my first question is a light, open-ended one. It's about your journey. It says you've been teaching for about 20 plus years now. What's your journey leading up to the point when you decided you're going to take up test prep teaching?
It was really almost the fact that I absolutely had a passion for, you'd appreciate this, entrepreneurship. And I am difficult. It's very hard for me to have a boss. It really is. Even if I can respect him or her tremendously, I can't for lots of reasons. I'm a bit on the spectrum. I tend to be quicker than 99% of the people around me. So even when I'm trying to be polite, it's really difficult. So to be a test prep teacher is one of the things in the US you don't have to be licensed for. If you're good at it, it will show.
Great. David, when you started off 20 years before, I assume it was not online when you started off. It was a classroom-based training. And there's been a lot of transition, especially with the pandemic that happened a couple of years back or 3 years back. I think a lot of things changed online.
Yes.
So how was that transition like for you? And what are the most important things that you'd have to adapt?
Well, I'm very good at connecting with students, literally. And of course, when COVID came along, everybody or 90% of the world went online, as I did. And I found that I needed to I tend to have a lot of humor because smiling and laughing helps to actually facilitate learning. It's been shown scientifically. It isn't just something that's nice to have a chuckle about. I was always good at that. I had to make more of an effort to get my students to laugh. And that kind of limited the virtual distance between us as if we were actually together. So that was one aspect.
Got it. So you're saying you did not face any challenges connecting with the students online just the way you did when it was not online?
Yes, I did. As I said, I had to establish more of a rapport. It's easier to do it face to face. Okay, you know that we can read people when we're actually in the room with them, and it's hard to read them. Just like I'm looking at you. It's not the same thing as if you were in a seminar with me right across the room. Of course.
Yeah.
The other thing is that as the students have gotten on, there's a more difficulty with them in their attention span for lots of reasons, social reasons. We can go into that. That's a whole other topic. So you need to catch the attention, A, because you're not physically there, and B, that because the lowering of the attention span, you need to have breaks. You need to wait 10 seconds. Normally, I can just go on and on back and forth forever, but even good students today need breaks if they've been associating with social media in any way. You see, because everything is short. It's 30 seconds. You know that. I mean, the popularity of that wonderful Chinese thing, right? That we all wonder if it should be legal in the United States or not. Okay, what is that? It's 40 seconds, isn't it? TikTok. TikTok is like 40 seconds. That's one reason it's popular, because that's the attention span of most of my students.
I think probably understanding this particular thing will lead people to figure out a way to hold attention of their students. Maybe chunk it down, break all their lessons down into bite-sized lessons, and to
and you have to have timeouts. I find that. I mean, I was able when I first started 30 years ago to be able to teach a full 45 minutes or an hour even, and then have a break. But here, I need 2-minute breaks. As an example, one of my students loves soccer. And so I'll make sure every 10 minutes I'll talk to him about that last game he had, or he's practicing the bicycle kick, just a bit. And then we can get back to the SAT or the ACT, you see? Very important.
Right. David, I'm just going to go a little bit back and start off from the point when you transitioned from whatever you were doing before you started teaching. The reason I'm asking is this is just to be able to relate to people who are listening, who might be doing
Right.
something else, but they're thinking
So
of
let me do
starting to
that.
teach.
So I had a job as a drug prevention specialist at Bronx High School of Science, which is one of the elite public schools that you need to test to get into in New York City. So I was with some very bright people. And I knew that a few of them went to test prep companies like Kaplan and Princeton Review. And I said, I think I can do this really well. So I started with one or two kids that were really like me already. And I said, is it okay if I do this for free just to see how it goes? And I helped them. And then it became obvious that this was a passion that I could make money for and truly help students. That's a transition.
Great. The key here is to, when you want to start something new, do it for free, easy to find people for them to put them under you, and then see if that works for you. Great. And
Exactly. And you know that there's a lot of people out there looking for shortcuts. But the good thing about freedom, if I can can I just talk about that for another minute? The good thing about this freedom is that if you do fail at it, you haven't lost anything except a bit of time, as
right,
compared to
right,
putting a lot of money into a business that you're not sure you can do well in.
right, right. David, I was reading about the description that you've written for yourself on LinkedIn, and you say that you found uh, the methods that people used were inefficient and ineffective. Right? How did you come about to cross that?
Yes, thank you for asking. I was already a professional counselor. That's what I was doing at Bronx High School of Science. And I
Right,
know a great deal about psychology, both from my own particular struggles as well as, just learning about it. And so it was
right,
very clear to me that even then there had to be humor and there had to be a willingness to be where the student is, not where we are. Now that sounds easy, but a lot of teachers just don't do that or they're uncomfortable doing it. I did not feel right at the start that I was better than my students. I might know more about the SAT, but they might know more about soccer. So I was looking at them straight across. I wasn't looking at them from the heights on down.
right.
And that's key. I would not advise anybody to get into test prep if they have any arrogance about them at all. Let them know their craft well, let them work at their craft, and then be happy when they can connect with these students.
Right. And you started off teaching to a group of students. You didn't start off doing one-on-one. Is that correct?
Yes. So once I decided I wanted to do it, I said, okay, now let me work with Kaplan for a while. If I'm going to do this long
Oh,
term,
okay.
I need
Right,
to learn everything I can from them as I'm teaching. And so
right.
it was like a paid apprenticeship, Jag. And I highly recommend that for anyone else who wants to make test prep into a lifetime business.
So is this during is this during which you found the ineffectiveness and the inefficiencies,
Yes.
David, which,
Yeah, Kaplan is a very good professional organization. Okay. They put a premium on intellectual brilliance, which is not the number one criterion for being a great test prep teacher. If there's not a natural love of students, don't do it. I mean, you know that already from lots of reasons. If you don't want to learn how to do it well, don't do it. One of the advantages I had, Jag, is I always looked for shortcuts in high school because I wasn't a great student. I wanted shortcuts. But shortcuts on the SAT and ACT is a blessing to the students. What I always tell them, I'm teaching you stuff that nobody else does. As long as it's legal, who cares?
right, right. And David, some of the test prep coaches that I've spoken to, it's the successful ones have followed pretty much the similar path. They've worked with somebody, like you said, paid apprenticeship, and then going out and solving for the inefficiencies that they found there. But then
Exactly.
it's about finding a balance between probably the scale and the quality as well, right? Now, as an individual, how do you manage to solve that?
Well, I would say that as I got older, I started to realize that didn't want to work with every student. I didn't want to work with every parent. So I would say, giving you a percentage basis, probably about 8 to 10% of the parents and students that I could work with, I didn't, because either the parent really was pushing the student into college when the student could make more money as a electrician than as an English major, you see,
Right.
and also then because the student really, was being pushed by the parent, and so what was the point in getting a great SAT score if it was likely that that student would fail in college? So I winnowed out, a fair proportion of students. And so what I say now, if you ask me now, who you're looking for, I would say great parents. And I define great as a parent who has a balance of love and freedom for that child, balancing the two.
Great. And how do you figure this out when you meet them for the first time? Is there any set of questions that you ask them?
Yes, I do. So let's pretend that you have a son. So I'm saying, Jag, okay? How
Right.
important is it that you get your son into MIT or Caltech or, a great Indian school? You see, that gives me a sense. If I
Right.
hear I want them to go to the best school they can, whatever that is, I have a great parent. But if they really have trouble in school, we'll deal with it. I don't want a parent who is substituting that child for their own lack of college success. That won't work. And I won't be able to help that child very much, honestly.
Great. This is one of the most defining criteria for you. This is pretty much it that seals the deal for you. Got it. David, when you started off, you said, you were in the counseling and therefore you had access to students. And then you figured that you could do this. You went to Kaplan. And again, you'd have had an audience, you'll be popular, and probably word of mouth, you'd have got your students. This is how it would have started 20 years back.
Yes.
Did acquiring students was always word of mouth until the pandemic?
Yes, mostly. I think I mentioned to your colleague that I would win the world's worst marketer award. So word of mouth works very well because it gives me my website for 15 years never got me one student. What it got me was a reaffirmation that I knew what the heck I was doing. That's what I use
Right.
it for. And that's the only
Right.
thing I use it for.
Okay.
But then again, you understand that a warm connection, a warm referral is worth 20 cold calls or 100 cold calls. So when I've really
Right.
helped a student to do well, it's natural for that. I don't have to, I usually don't have to ask. And they'll say, well, how can I help you out? I said, who do you know that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. And after the pandemic struck, it was all online, right? Did you still stick to word of mouth, or did your geography spread and you had students across the country from?
What I was doing was working with Alignable, which you're familiar with, I think. You're not? Alignable is a
No.
very good network. It's a very good networking program because you get to know people. It's not like, and they do kind of a speed networking, but the speed networking is not to talk about how great a tutor I am or how great a podcaster you are. It's to say,
Right.
Jag, what are you about? What about your kids? So it's an introduction. We have 7 minutes. Okay, this is how I've gotten the last 5 clients. Okay, we have 7 minutes just to get to know each other, and then you can follow up if you want to and connect. It's far better to me than LinkedIn. LinkedIn doesn't even come close to the success I've had with Alignable.
Could you please spell that for me?
Yes, sure. ALIGNABLE.
Oh, Alignable. Okay.
I don't know if
I've
it's in
never heard of
India.
this. Is the
I don't
first
know if
time.
it's in India, but if you wanted to make some money on the side, start it.
Is that virtual or is that in person sort of a thing?
It's
Alignable.
virtual, but actually it's interesting because today at noon we had the first local Alignable here in the Asheville, North Carolina area, which is Asheville's about a city of 100,000, and I'd say there's maybe another 30,000 around it. So it's a small urban area. And there were 24 people. We're going to get together every 2 months, and I'll be able, hopefully, to have once every 3 months have an actual physical meeting, which I love. I also, are you familiar with BNI, Business Network International?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been
Okay,
part of a couple of chapters as well. Yeah.
I've been the educational consultant in BNI up until 10 years ago when I didn't work with it anymore. Obviously, that was my job in the chapter, you know.
Got it.
So through
And
BNI and Alignable and referrals, that's like 99% of my students.
wow. Okay. And uh, how many days does it take to complete a student?
Great,
From
great question. So again, let's role play really quickly. So my question to you as a parent is, the first thing we need to do is establish you and your wife, assuming you're together, which is not always the case, you understand, that you and your wife, assuming you both care about your son and your son, the first thing we're going to do is take a few minutes to get together to establish what is the score that we want. So you
right.
might say, I want my son to get into Georgetown. I say, okay, 1500, that's our score. You see? And
Mm,
so then we can then what we do is I give him a test, initial test, and we see the difference between where he is in the 1500, and then I can tell the parents it'll take about this long if he works hard. That's how I do it.
wow. Got it. And you charge by the hour.
Yes. I find that's better because I find it's too easy to either be overcharge or undercharge if I charge, on a basis. Here's 10 hours. If the
Right.
parents
Right.
want it, I'll say fine. I say fine, but I don't think you want it because I don't know how long it's going to take Charles to get to that 1500. I don't know that. I've had 43 kids get perfect scores in the SAT, ACT, but most of them needed quite a while. Some of them didn't need that much time. If he starts out
Got
with a
it.
1400, how I may only need 2 lessons to get him to the 1500. You see? And what I
Right.
think, Jag, that most test prep students and companies do bad, this has to be completely variable upon the student and family. It's unique. It's totally
Right.
unique. And you can't do this in a mass basis and be as successful as I've been in terms of raising scores.
Yeah, just the way you described, okay, you know what, this is his score and this is where we need to get him to. The gap is what you
Yeah.
use to calculate how many classes you need. So how accurate are you most of the times about, say, for example, you say your child needs maybe 10 hours or 5 hours.
All
So
right.
is
So let
that
me
pretty
go
much
on. So let
what?
me ask a couple other questions. So I'd
Right.
say, Jag, Charles, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does he want to get into that great school? Give me a number.
Hmm.
And you might
Right.
say 7. I say, okay. If you say 4, it's going to take longer, you see. And you know your child, right? And let me just share one of the tricks, if I can. So one of the little
Please.
tricks is he's going to become the greatest guesser in the world, and that's going to gain him points. All I care about is the points. He'll have to learn guessing just the way he might have to learn geometry.
Right.
And he has to be
Right.
willing to learn the guessing techniques. And the timing, as you
Hmm.
probably know, is huge. I can spend a lot of time on the timing, and again, and there's also, in terms of, there's a few other tricks I have, which I'm not going to go into at the moment, but we can talk about it another time, that make it really easy for the parent to have an idea how the child is doing. For example, right now it's middle of May, and so school is winding down here. I imagine in India too, and so the child is not going to be able to focus as much on anything. They tend to be a little worn out, and you
Yeah.
have to allow that. So I'm seeing a student Friday who is worn out, and I'm not going to expect of him what I'd expect over the summer. If you wanted to set up a massive test prep program for me to run over the summer, right, where we had other teachers involved in all that, that would be probably at least 60% more successful than any program during the school year.
Right.
Because the way you learn the AP exam, right, the way you learn the hard exams in India is almost antithetical to the way you need to learn this test. You need to learn how to play Minecraft, not to come up with fancy words for the AP.
Right. Right. You said whatever you're going to be doing it in summer is going to be 60% more successful than when it is done during the
Yes,
school times.
assuming the student is willing to work in the summer, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they're not, then don't bother.
Do you run those batches every year?
Excuse me?
Do you run those batches every year during the summer? Do you
Yeah,
run these
I've done a lot of
programs?
successful summer workshops. Also, keep this in mind. If we do a weekend workshop and that student is willing to commit to the weekend, they may not need any more tutoring. A weekend intensive I've done at least a dozen times very successfully.
Right. These are group classes you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. But one of the thoughts I have in terms of what you do is that if we found, let's say, 5 really good teachers and myself, it's kind of senior teacher, if you will, we could work with 500 kids in a weekend.
Have you done that, David, before?
Not myself. No, I've always done it myself, but now that I'm older, I'm more willing to work with other people.
Oh, great. Okay. Have you succeeded in finding any so far?
I haven't looked. I'm
Okay.
fine, but they're out there. And again, if you have access to them, and we can talk about that another time, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, we can definitely do that. I just spoke to a couple of them before you who are into SAT. I think one of them was from the Chicago area. Fine. Yeah,
Hmm.
we can definitely talk about it a little later.
Sure.
David, when we started off this podcast, you said, you can help share all that you've picked up in the last 20, 25 years of your experience about being a test prep coach, right? And
Absolutely.
in India, it's just beginning, probably say in the last 5 to 10 years is when it is, it's a thing. Being a trainer for SAT, ACT is a thing because a lot of Indians are trying to go to the US to study. And in the last
Yes,
5 years,
I'm aware of that. Yes.
very bright people in their late 20s, early 30s have taken up this as their careers and a lot more are following. So,
Hmm.
what can you share with them for them to be successful? And is there a chance for them to also capture market from the US?
Not so much because the U.S. is changing because now a lot of colleges in the U.S. making this optional. Although actually that's a positive because if the student wants to show their, it's kind of like wanting to get a job. If you can show an extra a point on your resume, that's going to help get you the job. You see.
Right, 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 right.
Um, what I would say is that Indian Americans I found to be very concerned about price, but once we've established the price, we do really well. Okay. Which is why, if this can be done, what I'm thinking of is this can be done if you had, say, Indian folks and Indian Americans together, that would be a really interesting class, you know?
Right, right.
I
Okay.
don't think that's ever been done that I know of. I mean, perhaps, but I haven't heard of that being done.
I've not heard of something like that as of now.
I
Uh,
understand. But the other thing is, if you have someone who is middle class or lower, but willing to work their rear end off, which I'm sure you know many Indian students,
yeah,
there's something else that I'm going to bring to the table, and I can't talk about it in 2 minutes, not because I'm unwilling to, I just can't. Which is the
right,
fact I've taught sociology, and I understand the sociology of education. And so, if they're going to get into an elite school at MIT or Harvard or Stanford, right, and they're Indian middle class, it is just as important as the SAT that they understand how to fake being successful so they're comfortable with their cohorts in the freshman year. That's huge sociologically. You
right,
see? Because I've seen too many bright kids flunk out because of social reasons, not because of they didn't know the language. There's a certain language that upper class people have. You
right,
see? And even the way that they act and how they think about things, and the whole issue of what's proper to say now socially, and all of that kind of political stuff. You have to navigate yourself through it so you don't have people on the extremes start to come at you. You see, which they will. And so that's almost a course in how to navigate your freshman year at an American university. You see. And it's important from your point of view if you're trying to help Indian students to get here.
great. Yeah, this also looks like this could well become part of their SAT curriculum here. I mean, if the trainers are aware of all
The
these
fact that
things
it's
and the
new,
students,
Jag, excites me, you see? They can now learn to do it the right way and not the way that Princeton Review and Kaplan and a lot of the other big companies here have done, which has been okay, but not as great as it could be.
Right, right. But this cannot be solved with just thick skin, no matter how thick. Is that
That's right. That's right.
is that
You got to
established?
look at
Okay,
the sociology of it. You got to look at the psychology of it. You got to look at the understanding that somebody from, again, I'm talking middle class, the super
right,
wealthy in India won't have as much trouble at all coming here to the US. Obviously, you understand that. Okay. It's
right,
kind of the
right.
same language. But the hardworking kid that you and I are probably concerned about, who really wants to make a real great life for himself or herself, yes, I might even want to work on setting up a whole course about the sociology of American colleges. If that could be a helpful thing. But that's important because I've seen too many people. I've worked with some Nigerian kids who were absolutely
Hmm.
brilliant, but because they really came from a lower class Nigerian, it was so hard for them in college, just to adjust, to see the differences in blacks in Nigeria and blacks in this country. They thought they would be brothers. They turn out to not necessarily get along with a lot of them. You understand? But that stuff they
Right.
didn't know. I mean, they weren't taught that.
Wow. This is certainly a new challenge. Not only do they have to clear SAT and ACT, but after clearing that, wow, there's another challenge that is waiting for some of the students in the universities to face.
Right. But you see, from your
And
point of view, in terms of what you do, it's easy to put that in one course, which I
yeah,
think could be, it would have to be in certain ways, technically, the best SAT course in India because nobody else is doing it because this program is so new. Obviously, over
absolutely.
20 years, 30 years, I've had the opportunity to look at these things.
No, I've spoken to a lot of test prep trainers, but this topic I haven't heard about anybody talk. Maybe, you've got a great opportunity here to collaborate with a lot of trainers in India, because even
Yeah,
the trainers in India wouldn't have this experience because they have only been in India teaching SAT and ACT, right?
exactly.
So they have
I
no
know
idea
some,
what's happening there.
yeah, I have a good friend in southern India. I forget the name of the town. Tiramalusu. Am I pronouncing it right? You know what I'm talking about?
Tirupati?
Tiramalu. It's like it's a mountain that Ramana Maharshi taught on.
Oh,
So I have a friend.
Tirunamalai.
Yes, yes. Thank you. I'm terrible with that. Anyway, so I've talked to him a little bit about the culture there and how different it is. But one thing I want to share. I love to compliment, so you're going to get a compliment. 98% or some number of Indian people, if somebody gets hurt on a little motorcycle or whatever, driving around, the whole town will stop and help them.
Yeah.
This is a cruel country compared to that, and those kids better know it. You see what I mean?
Mm, got it. Got
I
it.
don't
Yeah.
want them coming here and thinking it's going to be the way it is there. The culture is very different. In that way, you are far superior to the United States. But don't tell any other Americans I told you that.
Thank you, David. I think at the end of the day, it's a balance of everything, right?
Of
I don't
course.
think today there is that balance anywhere. Everybody are lacking something or the other,
That's right.
and it's
Everybody's
about,
imbalanced.
yeah. David, you've taught a lot of students. What are the most common challenges that you see students face while they're on the journey to prepare SAT and ACT?
For the really bright kids who are in APs, they still use AP thinking in trying to do well on the SAT. I'll give you one tiny example, and I hope not too much of this gets stolen because I hope we can work together, but whatever. I'll give you one little example. Okay.
Sure.
For example, on SAT 1, the original first SAT after the SAT changed, okay, there's there's a reading article about Japan in the 1920s,
Okay.
okay? What I've told my students just actually 2 days ago when I was going over this, I said, you have to understand, there will never be a negative answer about Japan in the 1920s. Anymore, there'll be about Native Americans or climate change or Indian American relations or any of that. It's only going to be positive because the SAT is a business. Don't think of
Mm,
it like this objective test. It's not. That's one example of many.
wow. Okay. So you're saying there's no right or wrong answer. It's about what is expected as an answer. Is that what you just said?
You can eliminate lots of answers, okay, for various reasons. One is for being politically incorrect. This is one
Okay.
reason I've gotten those 43 perfect scores. It didn't happen just because, you know, it happened. We really worked at trying to get rid of wrong about And I would say, Jack, of those 43 students, probably at least 6 or 7 only got a perfect score because they could make great guesses that I've helped them with. And on a couple of questions, you see.
Got it. So, wow, this is, you're just saying knowledge is one thing. Yeah, you just said it. The way you learn for AP is different. The way you look at SAT and ACT is completely
Completely
different.
and utterly different.
This looks pretty much like a game that you need to
Yeah, and one
learn
more
the
point.
rules and play accordingly.
Girls
Yeah.
in general learn different than boys in some ways. Not all, you know. There's a
Mm-hmm.
different way to work with girls than to work with boys. So there's
Wow.
certain
Okay.
little things I'll share with boys that they're comfortable with. It's kind of like the intense sports, male, whatever, kind of thing. And they like that. And it's not, and of course there are women that are just tremendous athletes, but
Right.
still it's a different mindset. Um, it's encouraging women to attack it because it's not hurting them. They're not hurting anybody, you see. But I want them to attack it with a certain kind of masculinity, you know, that has given boys an advantage, even though they're not as smart as the girls in college. They tend to do about as well because the
Right.
test skews towards intense test, hit the test. You know what I mean? Rather
Yeah.
than just kind of, you know, play with it and not and be to be aggressive. Girls have to be, the girls that have gotten the perfect scores have generally learned to be more aggressive in taking the test.
Got it. Got it, David. David, you also mentioned an important thing about, being warm is way more important. David, before I continue, do you have a time that you need to stop at?
Yeah, we have about
Any
15 minutes, about the 10 of, okay? Or in your case, it would be what, if you have the half hour or whatever it is. So about
15 minutes
3:50
from
my
now?
time. So we have about another 10 minutes, yeah.
We have another 10 minutes. Okay, got it.
Yes.
And, okay,
And I'm
one
happy to come
common
back, by
thing,
the way. I'm happy to come back. So if you want to continue this, that's great. So go ahead.
sure. One of the things that most commonly, students face is the anxiety, right, before taking a big test. I'm sure you face, how do you can solve when people don't understand concepts, but how do you solve this anxiety problem? How do you not let students get succumb to anxiety?
So I use my quantum physics knowledge here. And I say, do you know what? There's only this moment because time itself doesn't really exist. So I'm calming them down and I'm saying it's this moment that matters. And we talk about how to let go of the previous section. Okay.
Right,
Just
right.
just let it go. Don't worry about it. It can't help you now. And so I get them to say, yes, whatever I did in English is not going to help me on math. Just to say it helps them, you see? That's just one little thing. But as a counselor, of course, I have a lot of stress suggestions for them, stress reduction suggestions.
Like exercises or, some breathing
Yeah. Okay.
techniques,
Like
something
one
like that?
other small thing. Okay. The week before the test, I want them to eat as if they're training for a marathon
Wow.
because
Okay.
because it's a long test. They need to train for it, and we work on that.
Right. Right.
You see, if you're committed to
Right.
it, you can have like 3 pieces of cake Saturday night after the test.
Got it.
You can celebrate then. And that's another thing. So I encourage my students to plan a celebration after the test and to the parents to do something really nice for them, whatever that might be for them.
Right. David, I would like you to validate this. I came across this trainer who said, in the preparation in the lead up to SAT or ACT, there's a peak. And he said, peaking in your preparation at the right time is important. Peaking too early or peaking too late is that a thing? Does this even make sense to you?
To some people, I mean, it's not an absolute. It may be
Right.
true half the time. I don't know. You see, what does the word peak implies? It means that you're getting tired of taking the test. So let me give you my outlier talk, okay? So I had one
Right.
student. I had one student who wanted to go to Harvard, and she was determined to do what she had to do.
Mm-hmm.
She took, Jag, 15 full ACT tests and 18 full SAT tests.
Wow.
And it wouldn't
In a
shock you to
matter
know
of,
she got into Harvard, would it?
yeah, it shouldn't come
So
as any surprise.
peak depends upon the individual. You see,
Right.
we in our ivory towers, we're trying to make judgments about kids. You can't make judgments about kids. They're all different. And it's so easy
Right.
to make like a sweeping generalization so you can make money from a book or a course. But it's not right.
Got it. Got it, David. David, given that, you've got just maybe less than 5 minutes to go, I'll probably, look at wrapping it up here. But I do have, from this short conversation, I've gotten
Actually,
a
I got
lot of,
10 minutes. We got 10 minutes. Go ahead.
okay, great. So, uh, after, you have a conversation with the parents and then, you decide, okay, this is the number of hours it's going to take. Has there been a situation, where uh, a student, when they began, they were on track, but during the course of your training, they just fell off and they drifted off and you had to let them go in the middle? And how do you deal with those? Do you try and convince them, motivate them back, or you're like, that's not my job?
Well, a little of both. So I'll meet because the parent is paying for it, except in rare cases. I've worked with adult students who have multiple choice tests, but we're not worrying about that now.
Right.
So I'll talk to the adult or adults. It might be one, it might be both, and the student, and I'll tell them what I
Mm-hmm.
see, and I'll say, "What do you see?" And so it'll kind of evolve that the student says, "I really whatever," and the parent says, "Okay, go to community college or whatever." So we'll see where it goes. I have no sense of whether that should be or not, because some students get tired, as I said in May, right? They'll come back in
Right.
July and be strong because they don't have any other intellectual things they have to be doing.
Got it. David, before anybody starts off their own test prep center, right? Like, say, after working for, like the way you work with Kaplan and then you started off, but that was some time back.
Right.
But today everything is online. What are some of the bases that these individual test prep coaches need to cover up?
Well, here's the thing. You have to decide, first of all, there aren't a ton of people who can really do math and English well. So I like to say that I'm bilingual. You see, I can speak math and
Considering
I can
math is
speak
another
English.
language.
Don't
Right.
pretend that you're good in both when you're not, and then hire somebody or work with a partner who's really good at the other, and really enjoys it. So if you don't enjoy math and reading, don't do the whole thing. It's not that there's that much you have to learn, but if you don't enjoy it, it's going to show, and you're not going to be successful, or at least not at the level you want to.
Right. And as far as getting students, you've said, for you, it's only been referrals. And how
And
much time,
referrals,
like,
yeah,
let's say, what is the percentage of time that you spend on getting students as opposed to you spend time teaching them?
right. See, I don't separate the two. It's fair. Because when I'm on Alignable, I'm enjoying chatting with people. You see, it's
Right.
not
Right.
like I'm looking upon that this is hard work. I can't stand it. If I don't want to talk with somebody, I don't talk with them. Because as I said, I'm looking for great parents. Great parents tend to be interesting people, tend to be open, tend to be thoughtful. Like some of the parents of my homeschoolers, of course, who've gone out of their way to try to give a better education to their students. So
Right.
basically, I'm at the point in my life. If I don't like you, I'm not going to try to pursue you, and I'm not going to separate kind of this is business and this is chatting because they go together. I mean, you
Right.
already see I love what I do. It's not like the saying, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah. 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 Yes.
That's how I feel. I I enjoy talking about this to you. It's fun for me.
Great. Okay, David, great. I think most of the things that I wanted to ask you from the point of, say, how do you acquire students, or the techniques that you employ and stuff like that, if we have to do another part, I'd like to just spend a lot of time talking with you about techniques, mostly addressing specific situations. You see, so that is something that I'd be interested in. But let's keep in touch on LinkedIn just the way we did, and we can have another part two as well. And about the sociological course that you said, have you developed a course so far? As it have you taught
Have I
that as
what?
a
I'm sorry.
subject?
Have I what?
Have you created a course, or have you
Well,
taught it as a
I have
subject?
another course. Let me talk about it. We have a couple of minutes. I have a course which I'd
Okay,
love to do with you, which is called The Belief Wars. Okay? It
okay,
incorporates
okay.
quantum physics and sociology and counseling and psychology and philosophy into why is it that we are engaged in belief wars, in this country and certainly in India too, like everybody seems to be almost a prisoner of their own beliefs. And
Right,
that is a
right.
mini course I'd love to possibly do with you guys at some point. So that's kind of that comes from all my experience in trying to kind of be a moderator and being able to see two sides of things. Also is written in my 100 poems that I've written. So, but that's what it
Brilliant.
comes in. I don't know to what extent there is that in India. I think it's extreme in this country, but I know that it
It is
exists.
pretty extreme here also.
Right.
It is
So
all about
that is
belief
a
was.
course. So that is a course that you folks can do, and what would be great is to co-host it with an um, Indian intellectual who is also concerned and is also sees two sides to things and kind of gets pelted from both sides. You see?
Sure, David. And would you also be interested to do the sociological thing that you said?
Yeah, yeah.
The
That we could do as like a one lesson thing, I guess. That doesn't have to be a long course. I think that there's some material that I remember having from a few years ago that was talking specifically about that a sociologist was studying that in terms of people from foreign countries coming to colleges and did a whole study about that and the certain words that they had to say at that time that were okay and the certain things they did that were considered horrible and that students didn't want to talk to them, all that kind of stuff. But that's changed in 10 years, you see? I looked at that about 10 years ago, and it's totally changed now, but it still exists. But I can give you an overview of that, in terms of stuff to look at if I were the parent of a student coming from India to the United States.
right. Because what I can do, David, is immediately maybe it's a ready thing. I can like talk to people, and if you're interested, I can have you connected, and then maybe they'll organize all the logistics. You'll just have to come in as a
Right. And
guest
let me just
speaker
be
to moderate
frank. What
the
I'd
stuff.
love to do is do something where, for a small amount, not what probably you're worth or I'm worth, we can do, a small thing and then see, and we can expand it and we can
Of
kind of make
course,
it better. That's probably the
sure.
best way to do it rather than do some vast thing. I'm like, there's 100 SAT tutors and I'm going to teach them. Not that I couldn't, but you know what I'm saying.
No, no. We'll start it off as a small pilot, and
Yes,
I will
that's what I would like.
text.
So I'd like a small pilot. When we get together, you'll talk to me about that. So I hope you've got something from everything I shared. You asked some
Yes,
very
yes.
good questions. I appreciate that. And
Thank you, David.
you're welcome. And as I said, I think I have a passion now almost more to teach teachers to become great tutors because that's easier to do, than the way a lot of the students are these days.
No, that's literally the multiplier effect that you would provide, because you've got a ton of experience, and if you can spread it to teachers, they're gonna like transfer it to so many more students,
And
which you may not be
particularly
able to do
because
by
of what you
yourself.
said of how new the SAT prep industry is in India, that it's just starting. And I'm hoping that partly through my efforts, a lot of it can go in a better direction than SAT and Kaplan and Princeton Review and all the rest of the big boys over here.
Definitely. I'm gonna go back and maybe come back to you with a proposal or two, David. We will keep
That'd
in
be
touch.
great. Anyway, it was wonderful talking to you, and we'll talk
Thank you.
soon.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.